Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, let's start the story of where Issei became a villain and had the Omnitrix. He could have been a hero, but now he has to walk the path of the villain, ruthless villain, alongside with his teacher. He will let them know that they should not have underestimated their new enemy. A little note, this story was translated by me. I tried my best to fix the grammar and, more importantly, the character's gender. But here is the change of the genders. In this universe, Vala's gender will be female. That's the only change. And the rest, you know their gender. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more information. Now let's get into part 1. The person was sitting in a chair. This person was none other than Issei Heidu, with a look of total boredom on his face. In front of him at a desk was a gray-colored being with red eyes. He was wearing a red robe with black stripes, paler skin without tendrils or wrinkles, and eyes completely open. These two people were staring at each other while a look of coldness was drawn on Issei's face. This person was none other than Issei Heidu, the current Sekiryuutei, but many did not know that he carries one of the most powerful sacred gear. His main reason was to go unnoticed by certain people. Issei, you know Albedo, I'm already completely bored that I'm always the bad guy in the story, and they get away with it, he said coldly in his tone of voice, catching the gray guy's attention. Albedo, if you are interesting, Issei, I understand that you are angry. He could not finish speaking when interrupted by Issei. Issei? You're wrong, Albedo. I'm actually disappointed in the blind people who are the leaders of the factions, he said coldly. This completely confused Albedo. What I'm trying to say is that some have experience or skills to know who the real hero is, but it seems that they are guided more by the appearance of a person. He said the last words mockingly. Albedo, actually, I would like to understand you, Issei, but I have always played the role of the bad guy and not that of a hero without a cape, he said seriously, to which Issei just looked up at the ceiling. Issei. Yes, my brothers always tell the story of their horrible and bad brother, he said with irony in his words. People like them are not worth protecting, but tell me who else will do it, fake heroes or the bad guy in the story, he said with sadness in his voice. Albedo, we are not people to judge others, mainly because we are not perfect, he said angrily in his words. I say, just by living, people hurt others without knowing it. As long as humanity exists, hatred will also exist, he said before seeing a clock with black and red details next to Albedo. Love ends when betrayal begins, but I have never known love because I have always lived in endless betrayal, he said, while extending his right hand to the clock that was on the desk. Albedo, you are willing to change the world even if it means getting innocent blood on your hands, he said seriously, to which Issei just smiled under, while Albedo watches as Issei takes the watch in his hands. Issei, I don't want to do good things, I want to do greater things. He lifted his gaze and stared at Albedo as he put the watch on his right hand. Albedo, in that case I entrust you with this version of the Omnitrix created by myself, he said proudly in his words, as he slowly disappears before the gaze of the brown-haired boy. 2 years later, the factions had managed to seal the beast of the apocalypse, the Trihixa. Everything was tranquility at that time, more than anything peace. Among those people who managed to reseal the Trihixa were 3 outstanding people, which are Dai Heidu, who practically owns the sacred gear where Kromkruch's soul resides, an evil dragon known as the Crescent Circle Dragon, and is said to be the strongest evil dragon. His brother's sacred gear is called Cursed Moon, Iko Heidu, who possesses a sacred gear which resides the soul of Tiamat, a dragon and the only woman among the 5 great dragon kings. She is a blue dragon known as the Chaos Karma Dragon. The name of her sacred gear is named Imperial Chaos. Valerie Lucifer, who carries the sacred gear in which resides the soul of one of the 2 heavenly dragons who is Albion, the White Dragon Emperor. The name of his sacred gear carries the name of Divine Dividing. The 3 are considered heroes among all factions, or rather the first is the outstanding hero, but some people were traumatized by the fight of a being who is considered an artificial demon created by Rezavum Live and Lucifer. Among those people who was affected by this was none other than the most beautiful seraphim of heaven, Gabriel. That creature, in the words of the leaders, had decided to judge the seraphim Gabriel for the worst sin she has committed in person, and that was to judge in the name of her father, Elohim. They did not understand what he meant, but it seems that the one who ended up paying dearly was the seraphim Gabriel, who now had a lifeless look in her eyes. Sometimes she started to scream out of pain, anger and fear, but not fear of that creature, not fear was itself. Many tried to look for him, but it seems that they never found him. It was as if the earth had swallowed him up. From one moment to the next, another creature appeared with that symbol on its chest. This was during the attack of the Inferno Alliance. This beam had played bowling with the DXD team. He was a bowling ball creature, and they were the Pines. In the end, they all arrived with a sign that a truck had passed over them. Some gods like Zeus or Odin saw this with an analytical look. After a few days, something happened that took by surprise those present, and it was to see that another being like him appeared 2 months after rescuing evil Leviathan from Mix's control. The descendant of Leviathan could not do anything against him. This being used her powers against her. Many did not understand why he did it. They thought that just because he was one, mainly Hyd was going to be easy to defeat, but there was his mistake by using the power of Inkwell Leviathan against him caused a serious pain that left him on the verge of death. This was doubled with his ability to produce sound waves caused even more pain to all supernatural beings that were partly dragons. Inkwell Leviathan realized that her sacred gear was extremely dangerous, so she stopped singing, so that no one would use her songs and powers against her. It hurt her a lot that they have taken away her passion for singing. It hurt her in a great way. Currently in the underworld, many leaders of different factions were gathered, angels, fallen angels, demons, gods of different mythologies, as well as important beings in the supernatural world, just like the anti-terrorist group DXD. On the side of the angels is their current leader, the seraphim Michael. Next to him was his sister, the seraphim Gabriel, the most beautiful woman in heaven, as his escorts were Rena Shudu and Griselda Quarta. Of the fallen angels was their current and new leader Shemizai. On the right side of this is Barakiel, and on the left side is Penema. Of the demons there are the current four Mass, the Mayu Lucifer Surgic as Lucifer, the Mayu Leviathan Seraphol Leviathan, the Mayu Beelzebujuka, and the Mayu Fabium Asmodeus. The Biao case is their current Queen Yasaka with her daughter Kanu. On the side of the vampires were Valerie Teeps and Lementhald Karnstein. Of the gods of Asgard is its leader, Odin, with his son Thor, as an escort as Gondel. On the part of the Olympians are their leader, Zeus, along with Hermes and Athena, other gods such as the god of destruction of Hindu mythology Shiva. There was also Indra as the king of the gods and lord of the sky in Hindu mythology. He is also the god of war, storms and rain. But the DXD group was its current leader, Dolio Gesualdo, the Joker of Michael. Its sub-leader is Sun Wukong, Azazel, the peerage of Rios Gremory, along with the peerage of Sonus Citri, the peerage of Sequevra Agars, the peerage of Sarah Ergbail, and finally the peerage of Dihadu, the team of Tobio Icus, Yulong, and finally the team of Valerie Lucifer. Bijuka. This being is extremely dangerous for us, and he treats everyone in the DXD group as mere children, he said seriously, while showing the image of that being who has humiliated the Gabriel Seraph and the DXD group. Zeus. 1 is coincidence. He took the floor while raising one finger. 2 is coincidence. He gritted his teeth in frustration while raising another finger. But 3 is already the action of an enemy. Before slamming his fists against the table. Michael, I understand Lord Zeus, but this being knows all our weaknesses and uses them against us, he said with frustration, before turning to see his sister with those lifeless eyes. Valerie, I have tried to divide his power, but it seems that doesn't even work, and the worst of all is that he has never seriously fought against us, she said with frustration, attracting the gaze of everyone present. Die. Since he might not fight seriously against us, not for nothing are we strong, he said with frustration, Sun Wukong. He has somehow been able to deal with us, but I feel that he has not come with the intention of killing us, he just wants us to leave him alone, he said seriously, which made Dai click his tongue in disgust at those words. Athena. If this being can't possess an angel and is not at all weak easily, he mentioned with a serious look. playing bowling with others. He pointed to the DXD group. And finally using the sound against each one, it is that somehow he knows all of you. He pointed serenely, Albion. Those sounds that he used in that small form were extremely painful, that almost makes me lose control. He said while the divine dividing appears on Valerie's back. Azazel? I think the best thing for the moment is to keep an eye on him, because if we attack him all at once, I don't know what surprise we might get, he said seriously, to which many paid attention to his words. Envold. I'm sorry, if I hadn't allowed him to copy my songs, none of this would have happened. She said with guilt that one of her songs harms others. Valerie, don't blame yourself, none of this was your fault. She said with a small smile, to which Albion agreed. Hobio. Although it's hard for me to say this to all of you, more for the reason that you don't believe it, the only one who has been able to face him getting tied with that guy is Issei Heidu, he said seriously, which attracted the attention of those present. Valerie. You must be joking. The only thing he does is to get in the way of each of us. She said angrily, unable to believe what was coming out of Tobio's lips. Tobio, I'm not playing so you can believe me. I'm going to show you the reason why he's the only one who can face it. He said seriously. Well, from a pocket dimension he took out a black orb. Recording. You could see two people standing in front of each one, but what caught their attention the most was that it was the monster that looked like a ghost. This attracted the attention of those present who were watching this scene, and in front of them was Issei Heidu with a serious look on his face. Issei, you are an Octomyrite, he said seriously, drawing the attention of everyone watching the recording. Octonurite. Yes, but I prefer the name of Ghost Freak, he said in a voice that scares girls without any exception. Issei, but seeing the symbol on your chest, and the only one I know with those details, he said seriously, attracting the attention of those present. You are Albedo, he said coldly in his voice. Albedo, maybe it seems that I couldn't fool you, little novice plumber, he said with mockery. This left those present surprised. Issei. I have a doubt, Albedo, your goal was not to get Benjamin Kirby Tennyson's Omnitrix, he said seriously, to which Ghost Freak remained silent for a few seconds. Albedo. That's my main goal, but for the moment I'm going to entertain myself by annoying those supernatural beings who think they are superior to the other races, he said with coldness in his voice. Issei. I'm not going to allow you to attack them like that, he said seriously, as he lifts the sleeve of his hand, showing a green and black watch. Albedo. You're fucking human, you also carry an Omnitrix, he said in a state of shock. This caught the attention of those present to then see how Issei was enveloped in a green aura. He had transformed into a being similar to Ghost Freak, but they could notice that the symbol on his chest was now white instead of a green color. His eye was a purple color, but what caught their attention the most was that he seemed not to be chained. Issei. In order not to confuse us, you can call me Octonurite, he said calmly with a voice a little more serious than that of phantasmatic Ghost Freak. Sounds good to me. Let's see if you can keep up with me, he said excitedly. The two at one moment became intangible and then appeared in front, where both began to struggle for good that he was stronger than the other. Victorimirite. What did you do to the feather face? He asked coldly. This attracted everyone's gaze, but Seraphim Gabriel was hurt by those words. Ghost Freak. I just showed her the truth and her possible future come true, he said with mockery, to which he upset Octonurite. Octonurite. So that was it, he said indifferently, before turning intangible and appearing behind the Albedo. I don't care what happens to her, what bothers me the most is that you hurt innocent people in your attacks, he said coldly. Well, Octonurite's hands turned into claws and he scratched the face of Ghost Freak, which surprised those who watched said recording. After a few minutes, all the factions watched as Albedo and Issei fell to the ground without signs of being able to move. It seemed that they had reached their limit. At that moment they see how Issei returns to his human form without any injury while he pulls out a kind of pistol from a pocket dimension. Issei. Last words, Albedo, he said with a small smile while pointing that strange weapon at him. Albedo. You trust yourself, he said mockingly before turning intangible, where Issei could only grit his teeth in frustration. End of recording. Everyone couldn't get out of their surprise when they saw that Daiharu and Aiko Hayate's older brother could face that being, but they noticed how the ace's attitude became more and more arrogant with every passing second of said fight. But at least they already knew the name of their enemy, Zeus. Perhaps it seems that the boy knows more than he seems, he said calmly. This caught the attention of those present, but everyone's doubt was won. Yes. Issei Hayate had that object because he didn't use it before, but Tobio Ikis was a little surprised by that fight. It seemed as if the two of them were acting somehow, and he wasn't the only one. Another one of those people who thought the same as Tobio was Athena, Elmentald Karnstein, Seraphal Leviathan, Sona Citri, Azazelan, Ajuka Beelzebub. Ajuka? It must be my imagination, or these two knew I was recording them, he thought seriously, seeing that both of them did not change their fight place, mainly Asai Cerzicius. I'm going to ask Graphia to go find Asai to answer some questions we have, he said, to which most agreed with that idea. Aye, that bastard had that power, and he hid it from me. I refuse to believe that we are on the same level now, he thought with frustration as he turns to look at his peerage, especially Ink Leviathan. Meanwhile, with Issei Hidu, you can see Issei lying on the roof of the Hidu mansion, which had a look of total tranquility on his face, in that he raises his hand, and a butterfly stands on his hand with great tranquility. Issei just stays watching the butterfly. Issei. So many are going to want answers from me. I can imagine what's going to happen, mainly among those brats, he thought coldly, while looking up and watching the clouds. The image of his fight between Albedo passed in his mind. Instead of looking like a look of concern, a smile of mockery etched on his face appeared on his face. Issei. The factions will try to recruit me or try to take the Omnitrix from me, he said coldly, before looking at his right hand with the Omnitrix on his wrist, in that the sun shines and you can see something unique. Half of the Omnitrix turned a red color, while the other part was still the same shade of green. Issei seemed this could not help but smile with some mockery on his face. Issei, I could have cured Ingvild completely, but a temporary medicine to make her suffer will be more than enough, he thought with some mockery, remembering that Ingvild needed to take some medicine, which was stolen by Haida and given secretly to the mentioned. If my calculations don't fail me, the medicine will run out in about 3 days at the most, he thought again when he saw the scared face of two people. A memory came to his mind of the conversation he had with Albedo a few days ago. Flashback. There was a brown-haired boy watching with a bored look the fight between Valerie Lucifer and his brother Dai. For him this was a children's fight because of the way they both fought with each other. Albedo. Your brother, if he is trying to follow, he passed to your rival Issei. It makes me laugh that many people think he is a hero, he said with mockery, to which the brown-haired boy agreed with him. Issei. You're a little right. It's a pity that she rejects him like that, but I don't understand why, he said calmly, while still watching the fight with a look of coldness on his face. Albedo. The reason is simple. When you used Pelerota Arboriano, you showed that he is not worthy to be her mate, he said with mockery in his tone of voice, but Issei grimaced in disgust. Issei, accepting her as my mate, in the past I wouldn't have thought twice. Well, a small smile appeared on her lips. But now, realizing what kind of woman she is, I'd rather be single than be with a woman of her kind, he said, while erasing that smile. Albedo. By the way, Issei, never help people who are not worth it. If they want something, tell them that you win with it, he said seriously, while looking at the Omnitrix on Issei's right wrist. There are still more improvements to be made so that it reaches its maximum potential, he said seriously, to which the brown-haired boy agreed. Issei. Sometimes I want to kill them for all the suffering they've done to me, to the point of wanting revenge. With the passage of time I've realized that I gain nothing with that. I'm just going to self-destroy myself, he said coldly, as he activates the Omnitrix and moves the dial until he finds the transformation he wants. Albedo. The most powerful transformation if you are crazy to humiliate all of them, he said with a mocking smile on his face. End of the flashback. The brown-haired boy came out of his thoughts when he felt that something was covering the rays of the sun, to which he slowly opened his eyes to see in front of him the strongest queen of the underworld. Issei. One could make a sigh that is disturbing the beautiful view, he said calmly, to which Graphia raises an eyebrow at the brown-haired boy's comment. Graphia? I'm sorry, Hidu, but the leaders of the factions request your presence, she said seriously, to which Issei grimaces in disgust. Issei, but I'm not attached to any of those factions. I'm just a simple human, he said calmly, while keeping his eyes closed. Graphia, in that case, I have no choice but to take you by force, she said seriously, but at that, the brown-haired boy opens his eyes and for some reason took a step back. Graphia. I say, so we have those in that case because I don't do the same thing Albedo did with Gabriel, he said coldly, while the Omnitrix is reflected through the sunlight. Graphia lucifuged the memory of the lifeless date in which the Gabriel serif ended came to her mind, to which she was put on guard by seeing the brown-haired boy with his hand on that watch on his wrist, while drops of sweat were visible on her forehead. Issei, better finish with this, but for once I say don't waste my time, he said coldly, as he puts down the dial of the Omnitrix. Minutes later, all the leaders of different factions listened to the footsteps of two people, to which I greatly annoyed who tried to hide it with a fake smile, while some gods saw all this seriously. The door in a matter of a few minutes was opened, where Graphia Lucifuge entered. Behind came Issei with a bored look on his face, with his hands behind his head, all this while seeing the ceiling of the living room. Suspicious. Thank you, Graphia, for bringing him here, he said with a small smile as he sees the brown-haired boy not paying attention to any of those present. Ico. Brother, have more respect for the faction leaders. She scolds her older brother, but he doesn't even pay any attention to her. Azazel, boy, all of us have some doubts of which you are the only one who has answers, he said seriously, to which the brown-haired boy under the gaze hand saw with a glance a few allies of the fallen angel. Issei. No. That was what I answered, to which he caught those present off guard. Sona. As if you're not going to answer, don't you see that this is extremely important? She said seriously, to which the leaders watched Issei take a chair, turn said chair over and sit on it. I say you get your answers, but what do I gain? I am a person who has interests in different things. If you give me something extremely interesting you can get your answers, he said calmly, to which the leaders were surprised to see the brown-haired boy leave them with his mouth open. Zeus. You have no right to demand such a thing. He suddenly got up from where he was sitting, to which Issei just chuckled. Issei, you see, I am a person who sells information, and such information has a cost. Nothing in life is free, or am I wrong? To which some only averted their eyes for those words. Asia. Maybe he doesn't want helping his brothers. She caught the attention of those present, all thinking that the brown-haired boy had come to his senses. Just to see the brown-haired boy let out a sleepy yawn, everyone couldn't believe the brown-haired boy's attitude for such an action. He had ignored them, and some gods viewed all this with disbelief. The leaders were embarrassed by the factional Pillar Brothers' attitude. They say, if you're done, we can continue with the negotiation or everyone go home, he said with boredom. Sergichus. Well. He let out a sigh from saying that word, attracting the attention of those present. What is it that you ask in exchange for such information? He asked, to which Issei put a hand on his chin. Issei. And if I want the freedom of the primordial goddess of the night Nyx, he said with a smile. This attracted the attention of those present. She will be under my care, he said calmly. Zeus. I refuse to release her, and I don't think I'm the only one, he said coldly. Die. Is that maybe you're crazy? She could control Ingvild again. He scolded his brother, to which Issei just stood watching die with a sigh. Issei. That's my price, it's that or nothing, he said with boredom. The leaders were shocked by the brown-haired boy's request. Athena. Although it hurts us, father, he is the only one who has such information about this Albedo, she said, to which Zeus gritted his teeth when he knew that his daughter was right. Die. We can copy his memories, but we can't free that goddess, he said angrily, to which many that idea crossed their minds. Desai, I forgot to say that the Omnitrix has several functions, and if I am in danger, it can cause irreparable harm to several people with bad intentions, he said calmly, to which Dai only let out a mocking sigh. Die. You thought that because you have no way out, he said mockingly, to which Issei only laughed inside his mind. Issei? If you are so sure, come here and copy my memories. I dare you, little brother, he said mockingly, to which Dai chuckled. Promkruch, fool, stop. He's not joking, and I know you're hiding more secrets, Haidu, he said with a respectful tone, to which he drew the attention of those present. Seraphiel. What do you mean? She asked with hesitation, to which she attracted the gaze of everyone present. Promkroch. That boy is more dangerous than all of us, the boy has an ace up his sleeve, he said calmly. Issei, then one of the strongest evil dragons realized, he said with an complicit smile. Everyone was confused by such words. Promkruik. The boy's aura conceals another one if I notice you possess a sacred gear, he said seriously, to which everyone opened their eyes with surprise. I wanted to continue resting, but they ruined my sleep. It's not like that, Kromkrok, said a voice. Well, the boosted gear appears on the brown-haired boy's left arm. Azazel, you are the Sekiryuutei, he exclaimed with such surprise, and he was not the only one, but Dee opened his eyes to remember that the boosted gear was one of the strongest sacred gear, a god-killer weapon. That's right, Crow, but leaving aside all this because we didn't move on to business, he said with boredom, but Valerie Lucifer was on shaky feet. Valerie Lucifer in her mind connected some points, and could only take a step back. Issei Haidu was not normal. If he could face that guy without the boosted gear or both or even, while she was humiliated by the enemy with great ease. Valerie. If he hasn't used his sacred gear until now, it's because there was no need, and if that's added to that, he had that watch. Imagine where he loses in the worst way, and she knew one thing, she had no chance against him. Zeus. Just because you have a sacred gear doesn't make you. He was interrupted by Valerie Lucifer, who seemed to be trembling with fear. Valerie. Shut up. Maybe you don't realize that he hasn't used his sacred gear against that guy, she said scared, which made the eyes of those present open. He is far above us, she said with fear. The desire to fight against her rival had completely disappeared. Issei, also with the Omnitrix in my right hand I have achieved something interesting, he said with mockery. While in the boosted gear's hand some flames appear, the leaders and gods recognized those flames and added cold forward. The flames of domination. Michael, the boosted gear no longer has its limiter, so now it is at its maximum capacity, he said nervously. Now everyone understood that inside that room there was a real monster. Issei? Exactly, he said innocently. The truth only interests me to be at peace, but it seems that I can't because of you, he said seriously, attracting the gaze of those present. I just want to live a life of tranquility, but no, you come to disturb. I don't owe you anything, so if you want something you have to give me something. Nothing in this life is free. He mentioned the obvious for those present, who didn't know what to answer to those words of the brown-haired boy. Zeus. You don't get it, brat. He decided to go against it. He couldn't finish talking when he saw how the brown-haired boy interrupted him. Basically. But here we have other people who have betrayed the factions, or am I wrong? He said coldly, to which Azazel wanted to deny said words. All for wanting information, mainly to work as a double agent, or am I wrong, ex-leader of the fallen angels, Azazel, to which he could not say a word. Eco. Look, brother, you better stop that arrogant attitude, and you better help us, she scolded, to which Issei just turned to her with an emotionless look. Issei, you're challenging me? He said with mockery, to which Iko swallowed saliva by the look of Issei. I heard more to leave this attitude. Well, I leave aside this attitude, but they're not going to get information from me, and now do what they want because they won't get anything out of me, he said coldly, before activating the Omnitrix and squeezing the Omnitrix symbol, while a green glow surrounds him. They say, see factions, if you want to negotiate you already know what my price is for such information, he said in a cold voice, as he disappears on the ground. The leaders of the factions were between a rock and a hard place. Many needed those answers to go against that albedo guy, but their only source of information leave them with a word in their mouth. After that day died, Haidu tried to threaten his brother to give him the Omnitrix, But it seems that Issei had beaten him to it, and had disappeared in front of all the people. Many tried to look for him, but it was as if the earth had swallowed him up. From one moment to another, Albedo began to attack the factions more forcefully, which left them with a bitter taste to face that creature that only observes them with great indifference on his face. Another victim of Ghost Freak was Akino Himejima herself. She was emotionally dependent on Dai Hayadu. But it seems that did not work this time. Now she was a kind of robot without feelings. This left her father with great sadness. Another person who received a hard blow was Ingvild Leviathan. She did not understand why her disease returned and gave her at certain times, so she asked for help and opened her eyes with fear to see that her disease was slowly returning. If she used her magic again carelessly, she would fall into said disease in the worst way and without being able to tell it. She refused to think about such a possibility, so she was removed from the DXD group for taking a lot of risk from Dai hideout. He no longer heeds or cares about her. I don't understand what was happening. Currently, the descendant of Leviathan was looking down as she watched people pass by that mansion that was the Hayato residence. Ingvild, what is going on? She asked in fear of being pushed away by the person she loves. He doesn't pay attention to me anymore and only does it when others tell him, she said sadly, as tears appeared on her eyes. She just looked down with sadness while trying to stop the tears, but ended up breaking down in tears. She didn't understand what she did wrong, but at that she hears the sound of someone passing by the door of her room. Out of curiosity she approaches the door only to open it slowly, and see Issei Hayato with a bored look on his face, and could see a great creature on his right shoulder. Issei, if life has been difficult, it's not like that, my friend, he said calmly. The features have it complicated at the moment, he said calmly, as he continued walking. Maybe it seems that you are right, these factions are coming to an end very easily, and their hero just turned out to be a poorly made lie, he said with boredom. This greatly annoyed Ingvild. I'm no one to criticize, but factions can do whatever they want, he said, as he walked in the direction of the rooftop. After a few minutes Ingvild had managed to hide close to, and that creature that was on his shoulder did not understand what was happening. It left a bad taste in her mouth, and she felt that something was slowly falling apart. The creature, as Ingvild named it, it just stopped where a fence was, where Ingvild could see it perfectly. Issei, you know, I must thank you for the help you have given me, he said calmly, while showing the Omnitrix. Problems are getting closer and closer, and demanding too much from the Omnitrix can be fatal, he said seriously, while handing him some things. Yes, but this Omnitrix is not complete. With certain upgrades, you will be able to have access to the ultimate mode, he said cheerfully to his friend and student, to which Issei just chuckled. Issei. A good point. With Ultra T we can achieve such improvements. The problem will be to find the components, he said seriously, to which this being nodded his head. That's right, but leaving that aside, the factions will try to seek your help to find out more about these aliens, he said very calmly. This left Ingvild with her eyes open, who quickly covered her mouth to prevent them from hearing her cry of surprise. I say? Yes, but I don't need anything from them anymore because I had to do it myself, and it turned out much better, he told his friend and teacher. Maybe it looks like you don't expect anything from someone, he said with a smile. That's fine, but I don't understand what you're planning to do with making the descendant of that Leviathan suffer, he said. This attracted Ingvild's attention. Issei. I'm getting tired of you bringing up things from the past, he said coldly. My soul is dying of how she is happy with my brother. I have to accept that she is not for me, he said sadly. This made Ingvild's eyes open. I don't understand. You helped her in creating that medicine for her illness, he said, to which Ingvild opened her mouth at those words. Issei. Anyone would have helped her. I just did the right thing, he said with complete calm. You are a good person. You have to get over that love. She is not for you. You are going to find a person who really loves you. He gave Issei his support. Because girls like them are not worth it. You saved her against Nyx. You were the one who risked his life. But it seems that she is also blind, he said coldly, and Ingvild could not believe it. He had been the one who saved her, right? Issei. Let it be like that. I've already lived with all of them around me, and they've never taken my word for it. he said coldly, while watching the Omnitrix. After what I plan, there will be no turning back, he said with a tone of spite against certain people. Invild Leviathan came out of the shadows with a look of anger, to which he turned to Issei and almost slapping him, but Issei caught her hand. Invild? Don't lie that you are the one who saved me, she said coldly, as she sees Issei holding her hand with a cold look. Issei? Yes. You are blind, Leviathan, he said coldly. But I'm not going to say anything whether you want to believe my lies or not. That's already your business, he said coldly, while walking past her. Ingvild was surprised by the brown-haired boy's action, while this was observed with the eye of Albedo, who only shook his head at Ingvald's attitude. Albedo. Foolish descendant of Leviathan, he said. This attracted the attention of the Leviathan, Ingvald. He's lying. He's jealous that I'm with his brother, she said with spite, to which Albedo only denied with one finger of his hand. Albedo, you're wrong, or rather everyone is wrong, but if you want to know the truth, take this, he said calmly, while taking out an orb from a pocket dimension. This is a recording device, and see what really happened, he said while handing it to the descendant of Leviathan, before quietly retiring. Minutes later, you can see Dihadu with an angry look on his face. The leaders of the factions were beginning to suspect that he was not the hero he mentioned to be, but he was happy to have girls around him. His sister didn't know anything because she didn't want to waste her time helping other people like him. Prom Kruik. Yes, you are horrible, Dai, but the truth always comes out and it's only a matter of time, he teasingly told him, while Dai was sitting on a sofa in the living room. Dai, and that Kromkroy, you must admit that my plan is working out well, he said with an arrogant smile on his face. Kromkroy. You have a trash pride. Every dragon has his pride, and you don't have one, he said coldly, to which Dee looked away in disgust. The worst thing among our race is to steal another's mate, he said with a cold tone inside the sacred gear. Dai. And what about it? He asked with a mocking tone. They are going to be mine in the future, he said arrogantly. Krom Kruch. Drake Bearer is going to sweep the floor with you and no traces of your soul will remain, he said mockingly. At this Dai felt a shiver run down his spine by Kromkruch's words. Dai. My brother has a price, and if I have to give it to the descendant of Leviathan so that there will be no mouth, he said calmly, not knowing that all this was heard by Ingvild with lowered gaze. Promkruch. It makes me sick that she loves you, he said mockingly. Don't forget that everything in this life is paid for, he said before cutting his link with Dihida. Ingvald slowly fell to the floor, while in his hands, he had that gem in his hands. Tears fell to the floor, while the sphere appeared, a scene that caused Ingvald more pain to know that it is actually true. Ingvald, W.Y. She began to cry silently while covering her mouth while watching the recording where the brown-haired boy was losing years of life to save her. Sadness and her sacred gear were reacting, but suddenly an aura of sadness began to surround Ingvild. She slowly got up from the ground while holding the gem against her chest. Ingvild, forgive me, please forgive me, she said sadly, seeing the brown-haired boy in that state, and slowly remembered the image in which she almost slapped the brown-haired boy. This was observed by Albedo, who was on the second floor, just shook his head. The attitude of the descendant of Leviathan, as it helped him in opening someone's eyes, just turned around. Albedo, now where is that girl who protected the liar with her life? He said coldly, as she walks away in the direction of meeting the brown-haired boy. Next day, all the residents of the Hayata mansion were coming down the stairs only to see at the table sitting very calmly, next to him was Albedo, but as no one knew of his original form to which he went unnoticed. Iko, brother, she said, surprised to see the brown-haired boy sitting at the table eating very calmly, which he didn't give a fuck. Issei. What do you want, sister? He asked coldly, to which she quickly averted his eyes, but in that they see how the brown-haired boy was calmly having breakfast. Valerie, what do we need? Everything you know about Albedo, said the Albion carrier seriously, but also didn't give a fuck about her. Issei, it's not my business, he said calmly. It's theirs fight, not mine. he said, as he got up from his place and put his hand on where Albedo jumped to this one and passed between Valir without looking at her. While Lengelveld was lying on her bed, she did not feel like going to the Qua Academy. It was difficult for her to see the brown man's eyes. Her hair was a mess and her fighting spirit had completely died down. She had not been able to sleep, so her eyes were dark circles. Ingvald. He almost lost his life and I treated him like a garbage. Well, she had next to her head the gem that being gave he. I don't deserve to be with him, she said sadly. At that she hears how they knock on the door. She didn't feel like seeing anyone, of which her door had looked, but at that she heard knock on the door again, to which Ingvald grimaced in disgust, to which she lazily gets up from her bed where she forcefully opened the door with her eyes lowered. Ingvald. I don't want to see anyone, you don't know that I want to be alone. She shouted angrily at every word came out of her mouth. Sorry to bother, but I just came to deliver something to you, he said calmly. That voice was recognized by Ingvald, who looked up and saw in front of her room, Issei. Ingvald? Issei. She whispered softly. She didn't understand why the brown-haired boy was in front of her. Issei. I just came to give you this, he said calmly, while holding out a bottle from his hand, to which Ingvald opened her eyes with surprise at the sight of that bottle. Take this for 7 days and your illness will be history, he said calmly, while Ingvald opened her eyes with surprise and tears began to come out of her eyes. Ingvald, why are you helping me? SHR asked in a low voice, to which Issei only raised an eyebrow. Ingvald's sudden change of attitude. You help me as if I've never treated you badly. I don't deserve your help. She had completely broken down as tears came out of her eyes. Issei only saw her for a few moments before looking away. Issei, you will know soon, he said calmly, with the medicine still in hand. Ingvild, I don't deserve your help, she repeated again when she saw the brown-haired boy. She wanted the brown-haired boy to hug her. Everything was so difficult to explain what was happening. Issei, I don't know what's happening to you, but if this is some kind of joke, I'm not going to fall for it, he said brusquely, as he takes one of Ingvald's hands as he puts the jar in her hand and leaves the place. Ingvald at this opens her eyes, had always treated her with kindness, but seeing this news she didn't know what to think. She felt guilty. Ingvald. And me, I'm an idiot, she said sadly, as she seized the jar in her hand. If you're screwing up more to the bottom, said a voice calmly, to which Ingvald turns to look to the sides, just to see that creature that revealed the truth to her. Ingvald, thank you for showing me the truth, she said sadly, as she gets down on her knees to see the little gray bean. It's nothing, but Issei is not a second table dish, he said calmly, to which Ingvald was confused by those words. You want to fix something that never existed between the two of you. Let him be happy and don't make a mistake, he said calmly, to which Ingvald looked away. Ingvald? But I don't want to. She was interrupted by that gray-colored being. He wanted to be your hero, but you treated him badly yourself, and that hero is no longer yours, he said calmly. Forgive me for what I'm going to tell you, but he deserves someone better than you, he said seriously, to which Ingvald only averted her gaze. Ingvald? That's not true. I can make up for my mistake, she said sadly, to which Albedo could only shake his head. You can repair your mistake, but someone else has already taken your place in his heart, he said calmly. Now you are in denial mode when you see who loved you was always by your side, and the person who claimed to love you only wanted you for your body, he said coldly. Those words hurt Ingvald more and more. Ingvald? Please don't say it anymore. I've learned my lesson, he said sadly, to which Albedo shook his head. I know I treat him badly, but I don't want to lose him even if it sounds hypocritical, she said sadly, to which Albedo stared at Ingvald for a while. Trusting you wouldn't be a good thing, he said, to which Ingvald lowered her gaze. What do you promise me that you won't make the same mistake? If you trust other people just for a pretty face, you are capable of doing the same thing again, he said coldly, before passing by Ingvald, who was shocked by the creature's response. Albedo walked slowly through the Hayato mansion. If he had several doubts in his head, if his apprentice Issei could forgive the descendant of Leviathan in the future, but seeing that the girl only wanted a free forgiveness instead of earning it, she was denying the sad reality of that girl, who was actually had been taking her favorite toy. In the afternoon, Issei is observed with a bored look on his face, while Valerie Lucifer's team, Rias Gremery's entourage and Dai Issei, except for Ingvald Leviathan, in addition to Arena Shido, were watching the brown-haired boy with a serious look, but he didn't even pay attention to them. Issei, there is something called personal space, now leave me alone, he said coldly, without taking his eyes off his cell phone. Eiko, upset by her brother's attitude, takes away the cell phone. Issei, seeing this, just grimaced in disgust. Eiko, stop acting like a brat, we need your help, she demanded to her brother, who only stood there for a few minutes. Issei, I was clear with you, you released Nyx, and I released the information I carry with me, he said coldly, to which he greatly upset those present. Baroka, how can you be Dee's brother? She asked mockingly, looking fondly at Dee. Issei, oh great, a motherfucking slut kit. He was interrupted by his sister. Eiko, stop joking, innocent people are suffering because of that albedo, and with your help we can prevent those people from suffering anymore, she said angrily about not being able to help all the innocent. Issei, how cute. That's why you don't have a boyfriend, he said with a mocking tone, which earned an angry look from those present. They can't even stand a joke, he said with faint sadness. Issei's attitude was getting on their nerves. Rios? If you had helped us, Akino wouldn't be in that state. She blames the brown-haired boy while pointing out to her friend that she was dead in life. Issei? First, don't come to blame someone else for your mistakes, he said coldly, to which Rias was going to complain. You can't force me to say something I don't want to talk about, you take care of that guy, I'm just a simple spectator of all this, he said coldly, while he takes his cell phone and retires in silence. Valerie, your attitude has already had enough of us, so I'm going to beat the truth out of you, she said, while holding Issei's shirt by the collar, who did not seem worried about this. Issei, it hurts you that he humiliates you, not being able to do anything against him, and you want to have a small advantage to beat him, he said coldly, to which Valerie opened her eyes with fear. It seems that I'm not wrong, you're afraid of losing to him, he said mockingly. Arthur, seeing all this, tries to separate them, but from one moment to the next, he sees Valerie Lucifer flying out, so everyone approaches her and sees a cut on her cheek. Surprised, he turns to look at the brown-haired boy, and sees a sword in the brown-haired boy's hands. Albion. That sword is not normal, Valerie. It is bathed in dragon's blood, and if so, it may be a dragon's slayer, he informed his wielder, who opened her eyes in terror when she saw that sword in the brown-haired boy's hands. Issei. I wonder what these idiots would think if they find out that this is the real Escalation, he said mockingly. Although it was stolen by Albedo, he handed it to the brown-haired boy to have an ace up his sleeve. Valerie. You, she said with fear, at which the brown-haired boy moved his hand and the sword disappeared. Issei. I didn't say anything before, but now I'm not going to stay with my arms crossed. If you try to touch me again, now you'll have to think twice, he said coldly. By instinct, Valir crawled back. At that moment, Issei feels a sword in his neck, only to see Udo Kiba with a wholly demonic sword that is pointing at his neck. Kiba? I'm not going to let you hurt them, he said seriously, to which Issei put a look of coldness on his face. Valerie watched as Issei drew that smile on his face. It caused her great fear. Behind it, she swore to see the transformation of Issei into that ghost. Valerie. Get away, everyone run, she cried out in fear, but it was already too late. Everyone saw how an emerald glow surrounded the brown-haired boy, only to see that ghost again that entered Kiba's body. Rias was scared. She didn't want Kiba to go through the same thing that happened to Akino, only to see how Kiba started hitting himself. He was screaming when he saw how Kiba broke his own arm himself. Issei, Kiba, you're not going to entertain me, we're just playing, he said with a smile. Your screams are music to my ears, he said before seeing Issei coming out of Kiba's body. He pulled away far enough only to see Rias Gremery standing in the middle, watching as Issei stopped in front of her, tears coming out of her eyes. She wasn't going to let him keep hurting Kiba. Rias? I'm not going to let you keep hurting him, so you'd better stop, she said with nervousness in her voice. Issei. I hope you understand this well, Gremory. I don't plan to help them without anything in return, and I'm not afraid of hurting others. I'm not like my brother, I hope they remember, he said coldly, before flying in the direction of his room. When Rias saw that the brown-haired boy was no longer close, she could only fall to her knees. Asia Argento was trembling with fear because of that situation. She felt useless because of what was happening, but Dai Hideout only saw all this with fear. Leif. What kind of monster is he? She asked in fear, as she seized Chiba lying on the ground. As long as he was screaming in pain, she couldn't move to help her friends. Arthur. He is someone to be feared. The best thing for the moment is to keep our distance from him, he said seriously, to which Lefay agreed with those words of her brother. Rias? A monster, he's worse than a monster, she thought in fear, as tears started to come out of her eyes. Near the door of his room, he returned to his human form. While he seized the Omnitrix in his right hand, he had lost control of the Omnitrix again. Issei. It's not long until I completely lose control, he said coldly, while his eyes shone a shade of green. Greg. If you are at the limit, all your accumulated hatred will bring great destructions, he warned the brown-haired boy, which just gritted its teeth. Issei. I know, I won't know how long I manage to keep my sanity, but I warn you once and for all that nothing will be the same as before, he told him sadly. Next day, you could see Sergic as Lucifer next to his queen, and wife Griefia Lucifuge. On the other side was Audon next to Azazel. In addition to Michael, they were serious about the situation that happened last night. Azazel. Perhaps it seems that the Sekiryuutei is no one to play with. He goes with the intention of killing, he said seriously, to which Sergic gritted his teeth at the sight of his sister trembling with fear. Odd, and if we add that to the surprises he gives us, he is someone to be feared, he said with a hand on his chin. But it makes me curious if he was always this strong, he said with an analytical look when remembering the state in which Valerie was left. At that everyone listens as Ingvald Leviathan was coming down the stairs with a sad look on her face. At this Dai Haidu approached her, mostly to keep that everything was going well with her, but Ingvald passed by without paying attention to him. Everyone was surprised by Ingvald's action. She was previously attached to Dai Haidu, but seeing her do this left them in doubt. With nothing to say, went straight to the kitchen. Odin. It may seem that the brat is avoiding Dai, he said with a mocking tone, but leaving aside the love problems of our pillar, we must discuss a negotiation with the Sekiryuutei, he said seriously. At this, Sergic looks up. Azazel? Before you say anything, Sir Zekias, we need him to beat that guy before being his brother. He pointed to the Gremory heiress. You are one of the current mass, he told him seriously, to which Sir Zekias knew he was right. Azazel. After a few minutes, Ingvald Leviathan came back with a cart where he brought several cups of coffee. I silently handed each person in the room a cup. To other people I handed a chamomile tea. Ingvald just stood still to the side, while this was being seen by Daihildu. For some reason he felt nervous about the look the purple-haired Princess Diva was giving him. Azazel was looking on another sofa at Valerie Lucifer, who was in a situation similar to that of Rios Gremory, who was accompanied by her entourage. Azazel. What is going on in this house? He asked in his mind. Since the brown-haired boy he had previously seen would not have behaved this way, something must have happened. Rias, he can't be free, she said with fear. This attracted the attention of those present. He's not afraid to kill us, they should lock him up, she said scared, which attracted the attention of Sergic. Odin. I'm sorry, Gremory, but we need him to fight Albedo. Without him we will be at a great disadvantage, he said seriously, to which Sergic knew that Odin was absolutely damn right about what was happening. Rias. But she was trying to find some excuse, only to be stopped by her brother Sergic. Sergic. I'm sorry, Rias, but right now Issei Haidu's help is extremely necessary for the factions, he said with a formal tone, which left Rias wide-eyed for not having the support of his brother. Azazel. Now the problem will be to try to convince Zeus to free Nyx, the former leader of the fallen angels said wearily. Michael. It seems that his confidence in being able to defeat this Albedo resulted in a humiliation to his pride. remembering how Albedo had played with Zeus himself and had a meeting out of his hand, his current enemy. Aden. Some people disagree with all this, mainly because of the anger he is putting everyone through. He remembered how Thor was humiliated by a being of pure diamond. Azazel. Unlike all our enemies, he only attacks randomly without any pattern, and the worst thing is that we don't know any plan from him, he said with frustration. Cercicus. The best thing will be to still reach an agreement with him, he said with a thoughtful look on his face. If I doubt that he will help us just because, yes, I feel that he is going to ask for things in return, he said seriously, to which more than one nodded. Azazel. The only thing we can know is that clock or experiment turns them into different creatures with different abilities, he said, since he did not recognize any of them. Envold. They are not creatures, it is something that many would not believe, she thought, while keeping that serious look on her face since she knew that they were extremely powerful aliens. Valerie. Yes, Office has tried to seek help from Great Red, but it seems that he refuses to help her. She said helplessly that the person they need help from treats them like simple children. And if I think it will be best to give him his own personal space to avoid problems, she said, since I listened carefully to what had happened last night, and who was really to blame for everything that had happened. Yes, they are children to not understand what is happening, but who can blame them? Said a voice that caught the attention of everyone present excepting Wild, who recognized that voice. The red details of Albedo had been replaced by a green color, but that was left out by Wild. Sergichus. Who are you? He asked seriously, as I saw the small gray-colored being on a small table in the living room. You can tell me, Galvin, but it seems that you have not been able to deal with this Albedo guy, and I don't blame you for it, he said calmly, since being called by the name of his race was not completely a lie. Azazel. So you know this Albedo guy. But who can tell us that we can trust you? He said suspiciously, to which the little Galvin only laughed at the look he received from those present. Alvin. I am something extremely superior to your race, but leaving that aside, I'm not looking for your trust. I just came to see if the medicine created by my student was helping the girl there. He pointed out very calmly to Ingvild. Serzex, what medicine are you referring to? He asked seriously, attracting the attention of those present to the Galvin. Galvin. The medicine to cure her illness, what else can it be? He said as if it was the most obvious. At that moment everyone turned to Ingvild in search of answers. Ingvild? The medicine has worked for me. I no longer feel the loss of my magic, she said, as she felt at her maximum power again. Elvin. Well, but leaving that aside, they will have a hard time against Albedo, and the only one who can give him a fight would be my student, he said calmly. Azazel? If you mean your student, you are saying that Issei is your student. Tying the clues that the Galvin gave him. Galvin? That's right, fallen angel. I thought they were going to need more clues, but maybe I'm wrong, he said with frustration of not being able to play with them, but no one noticed that tone from him. Rias, if he's your student, why didn't he stop him last night from doing what he did? Remembering how they were humiliated in such an easy way. Elvin. I told my student to choose the path he wishes. Besides, putting the weight of the world on his shoulders is not something I would do. He has his life and he must live it as he wishes without anyone telling him what to do, he said, to which the leaders together with Azazel looked away for those words. Sergius, the weight of the world on your shoulders, he said confused, as he did not know what Galvin meant. Galvin. He may be someone who is calm, but after the training I gave him, he is even at a new level now, he said proudly, since Issei was in a different league. Valerie? If you trained him, that means that you are also strong, she said with an analytical look at the Galvin. Galvin? You are mistaken. I am what is known in your language as a super genius, but that does not prevent the knowledge we have from being passed on to other people, he said calmly, to which most agreed. Azazel? I still don't understand why you consider Issei your student, he said curiously, to which the Galvin is left thinking for a moment. Galvin? Mainly because I gave him one of the most dangerous weapons in the universe, or as you saw it, the Omnitrix, he said seriously, which opened the eyes of those present. Die. You created that device, then you also created Albedo's Omnitrix. He said seriously. He wanted to be the only one with that power. Ingvild just put a sad look on seeing Dai's attitude. Elvin, you're wrong. The Omnitrix was created by Azimuth as a tool of peace and an act of repentance after the destruction caused by his previous creation. He said seriously, which drew the attention of those present. Albedo, due to wanting recognition of Azimuth, built an Omnitrix, his own Omnitrix. He said coldly when naming it Azazel, by saying that it is a dangerous tool of the universe, that means that what is inside it are aliens. He said with wide eyes. Alvin. Yes. What else did you expect? But the Omnitrix was created for other reasons. But it seems that I have said too much for the moment. He said calmly, as he left, leaving those present with more doubts. By the way, never try to use it, any of you, or you will pay a high price. He said seriously. After Galvin left, everyone was with looks of dismay because of what was going through his mind when thinking about that device, Azazel. Maybe it seems that the boy has more surprises for us than we think, he said with irony. Odd, and without a doubt the world, or rather we are not the only ones in this universe. He said seriously, with a headache when thinking about different alien races and knowing which one was real. Dai. This shouldn't be happening. I should have that power. He's just another hindrance of this world. He thought angrily, while seeing his hands and thinking that that power could have been his Ingvild. He wanted to be a hero, and it seems that we denied him. The worst of all is that he wanted to be my hero. She thought sadly. The memory of the brown-haired boy on the Juggernaut Drive came to her mind. Raythea. It seems that there is something else going on here, and one of the affected is Ingvild. She thought when reading Ingvild's attitude that she was showing at this moment, and she was not the only one, since Odin shared a similar thought. Dai. We can't trust him. Who doesn't tell us that he might become our enemy in the future, he said coldly, but inside he was planning that little Galvin will build him an Omnitrix superior to Albedo's and his brothers. Azazel? You're a little right. We barely know his name, but the information he has given us has been very confusing. He said seriously, but Ingvild did not understand what could happen in the future because of those words. But Issei is observed to see his reflection in a mirror in his room where the brown-haired boy was staring. Several thoughts passed through his mind. Issei. No one says it, but I am cursed and these powers were not written for me, he said with fridges. He overcame the truth that has been written, for everyone I will be your judge, while a smile was drawn on his face. There was no plan against the factions, but there was only one thing that no one knew, and that was that the factions were not going to stand a chance against him. Issei, they have treated me as if I did not exist. When a new enemy appears, they need my help again. He began to erase that smile from his face. I will show them that the real hero is now their enemy, and he is not going to stop for anyone, he said. Then the moment came when several memories crossed his mind. One of them was how he took all the happiness from the Seraphim Gabriel. He tried to help that girl, but no matter how pure you are, they will always have a hint of evil. She was talking behind his back about how she was going to accept his mistakes and stop telling lies that she saved other people, that all that was the work of Dai Haidu. They were wrong, and the real useless one was her brother. The second victim was the queen of Rias Gremri, daughter of Borkiel, one of the strongest cadres of the fallen angels. She tried to punish him for speaking bad of her or not. The Omnitrix in response transformed him without warning and losing control, the punishment in the worst way. He was tempted to do the same to others, but he opened his eyes to realize that if he shows them how useless they are, he could prove his superiority to others. He just hoped to get out alive. The only person who seemed to understand was the goddess Nyx. If in 5 minutes he can change the fate of others, then that time was more than enough to change his fate. With the right alien, it was child's play to free her, but he wanted to show that supernatural beings depend on humans. He also didn't want to deal with certain people if he manages to free her illegally. He already had his next victim in mind, and nothing is going to stop him. Slowly the Omnitrix changes color to a red one before a crimson glow surrounds it, and the shape of a particular alien is seen. Issei, there is no turning back after all this, he said, before turning intangible, leaving behind the Haidu residence to go even place in concrete. flying freely arrived at his destination, he slowly changed his shape to let the brown-haired boy see with a look of coldness on his face. At the Haida residence, those present are observed having breakfast with all the tranquility. But slowly the sky is getting cloudy, which Auden slowly gets up from his seat. Crash! Auden saw the lightning falling in the mountains. He knew more than anything that it was a sign of a bad omen, so he just thought that nothing bad would happen to his people. The storm had started minutes after the lightning stopped, so a person felt his chest being squeezed. That person was none other than Valerie Lucifer, felt that something bad was going to happen. Albion inside him knew that it was going to be a very long day, returning with Issei Heidu. Issei with a look of coldness on his face, in front of him was his next victim. At this moment, he was going to cross the line of what differentiates a hero from a villain. Lavinia Renee was not going to be the same as before. Valerie Lucifer saw her as her older sister, and Issei was going to take everything from his rival, making it clear that if he had followed his heart, he could avoid all this. Slowly Issei took a mask that he took out of his pocket dimension from which he changed his appearance. Issei. It's time to show that everything has a consequence, he said coldly, as he walked in the direction of the owner of the Longinus Absolute Demise, while the Omnitrix seemed to glow a blood-red color before being seen as Issei Heidu disappeared before the eyes of the others. While Lavinia Rinna was walking in the direction of seeing Suzaku Himejima, mainly to deal with the problem in mind, she was so caught up in her thoughts without noticing that someone was following her. Slowly, the sky was changing to a tone equal to that of the dimensional gap to which he is confused of what is happening. After a few seconds, he hears the footsteps of a person, but is surprised to see a 16-year-old boy with white hair, pale skin, red eyes, black eyebrows, and what stands out the most was his red jacket with black stripes. It didn't seem anything special, but in that she sees how the being lifts the left sleeve of his hand, revealing a red Omnitrix. Tobias had warned her about him, but seeing him in a human form left her confused. Lavinia, you're that Albedo guy, she said seriously, to which the white-haired boy drew a smile. Albedo. You think about how to escape from this place, but that thought is far removed from reality since this place will be your own grave, he said calmly, as he stops in front of Lavinia Rennie. Lavinia, I think you are underestimating me. Don't think that you will be able to beat me so easily, she said seriously, to which Albedo denied those words with a finger. Albedo. I don't believe that. I'm sure I'll be able to beat you. After all, I'm a supreme being, he said seriously, to which Lavinia got angry at those words. Of a moment Albedo disappears from her sight. Lavinia at this begins to look for him with her eyes while activating her sacred gear Absolute Demise, where she sees a crimson glow above her, where she opens her eyes to see the one with a unique large-sized bulky, magna-colored shape with rock skin, a giant mouth with teeth that are also made of rocks, and a bright red molten lava planet core in the center of her body. His feet are tan with 3 toes, and he has 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand. Albedo, I present to you the negative gravitas. Let's see how strong you are, he said, as he sees how he holds her knees and stays floating up to her. In Lavinia's mind passed the image that this monster took the form of a planet, so she had only one thought: Lavinia. I won't have it easy, she said, while the doll behind Lavinia was staring at Gravitac. All of a sudden a blue glow blinded the entire pocket dimension where Gravitac kept that smile on his face. Hours later, you can see Albedo cleaning the dust while in a small crater. You could see Lavinia Renai with several wounds who barely managed to stay awake, but fatigue was catching up with her. Before closing her eyes, she saw how Albedo was leaving the place with great tranquility. Lavinia. Sorry guys, I don't think I can get out of this one, she thought sadly, while a small tear came out of her eye. But Suzaku Himejima, she was worried about her friend Lavinia Renai, who has not appeared, so she went out to look for her. She also called the others if they did not know anything about Lavinia, but it seems that no one knew anything, except that she went to visit her. This worried the others. When she was crossing through the streets, she could see a barrier surrounding a specific part. It seemed that many people did not notice, but for some reason, Suzaku Himejima had a bad feeling, which was not far from reality. Slowly, the barrier was retreating, but she was shocked to see everything frozen. She slowly started walking and only to see a huge crater where looking into it, she could see her friend Lavinia with serious injuries all over her body. Suzaku. Lavinia. A heartbreaking scream came out of her voice as the rain covered the tears coming out of her eyes. She quickly ran to the aid of her friend. Elsewhere, you can see Issei Hayato with a look of coldness on his face. Negative grav attack was not enough to defeat the owner of absolute demise. He had to use 4 other transformations. But the Omnitrix was currently in a state of charge. He was grateful that he did not get any injuries when he returned to being human. Issei, it's only a matter of time before the factions realize who Albedo really is, he said with a smile on his face while watching through binoculars. Suzaku Himejima asked for help. Days later, the factions were at a critical moment when they learned that the bearer of the sacred year absolute demise, Lavinia Rennie, fell into a coma due to magical exhaustion and attention she received in her bones. The medical reports say that she was subjected to a magic that demanded too much from her body, in addition to some completely broken bones. The one who got the worst news was Valerie Lucifer. She could not believe that this Albedo guy will manage to make suffer who she considers as an older sister for her. Tobio's team did not know what to think about this. Some fallen angels began to check the area in any search for some clue to the whereabouts of who was the cause, but thanks to Azazel, they could see that in the memories it was about their current enemy Albedo. Valerie, with all the rage he had accumulated, went straight to look for Issei Hayato, who was in his room with a bored look on his face, while he was arranging some things in his room. When his door was completely destroyed into 1,000 pieces, Valerie was standing there with her hand extended, where a magic circle could be seen. Issei. What's wrong with you? Issei asked angrily to see how she suddenly entered her room, but she couldn't speak as she had to dodge an attack from Valerie. Stop attacking me now, she said coldly, to which Valerie didn't pay any attention. Everyone present went up to see how Valerie tried to attack the brown-haired boy, but it seemed to be dodging every blow of Valerie Lucifer, this before the gaze of some of the faction leaders. Valerie. If you had given us Albedo information, this wouldn't be happening to Lavinia, she said angrily as tears fell from her eyes, to which Issei pretended surprise upon learning about this. Issei, that's not my problem, it's her enemy, not mine, he said coldly, which Valerie shook her head. Valerie, you have that device, you could help us save innocent people, but you stand idly by because you didn't save her, she said, as she fell on her knees to the ground, substituting her anger for guilt. Issei, people change for 2 things, he said coldly, as he approaches Valerie, seeing her with a look of broke. His mind is opened, or his heart is broken. He said the last words with irony. I just had to have a bad day to realize that I can only trust myself, and people have to learn to solve their own problems. He sentenced coldly in every word that came out of his mouth. Invold was listening attentively to every word. The Issei Hayato that at a time when he was taking care of her from the shadows no longer existed. There was only one person who was not going to touch her heart to help other people. She wanted to go back in time to change everything and not make the same mistake twice. Azazel, maybe you're just going to stay with your arms crossed, he said seriously. He had tried to get Galvin to help them, but he just ignored them, and there was only the brown-haired boy left to help them. Issei, words can be more painful than bullets. You have your pillar, and I have only myself, he said coldly. So if you are leaders with years of experience, move your ass and help your people, he said coldly. Die. It's just that maybe you don't plan to help with that power of yours, he said coldly, as he entered the serum. Issei. That's right, I'm not going to help people like you, it's my life, and I decide how to live it, he said, while clenching his fists before changing his gaze to one of madness. I'll use this power as I wish, and if you don't like that, that's already your problem. Looking with that look at those present who felt a chill on their back. At that moment he walks back to the edge of the window and looks at everyone present with anger, so he moved his left hand to his right wrist where the Omnitrix was and activating it in passing. Issei, you'll never understand what I've had to go through, but I hope these words will sink into your brain. He pointed to his head. I've never hated you, but things can never be the same as before, he said before jumping back, breaking the window, to which Dai quickly approached the window to see an emerald glow. They only saw how that alien rose into the air before they could say not to leave. It had already disappeared in plain sight. They only saw a crimson blur pass in the sky. Damn, he has the potential to be a hero, but he only uses it for his own benefit, he said with anger and jealousy, which Ingvald only saw with a look of coldness. Since that day the brown-haired boy had completely disappeared. Ingvald wanted to scream in pain because of what was happening. It was painful for her to see Issei with a look full of hatred. She realized that the one and only true hero ceased to exist a long time ago. Ingvald, Leviathan's nightmare. The descendant of Leviathan could be observed walking with great tranquility, which did not explain the reason why she was wearing a wedding dress, which when she saw in front of her, she saw her own reflection in a kind of mirror. Ingvild? What is going on? She asked herself, as she tried to look for some answer, but there was none. In that he hears how the door was opened, where he could see Graphia Lucifuge with a small smile on her face. This completely baffled the purple-haired. Graphia? Yes. It's been a long time, Ingvild, she said calmly, to which Ingvild was confused by those words. Ingvild? What does Graphia mean? Ingvild thought with hesitation, to which this one approaches to hug her. Graphia, it's not obvious that to your wedding with Isama, she said calmly, but Ingvild opened her eyes in horror, suddenly shook her head at that thought. Ingvild, tell me this is not true, this must be a horrible nightmare, she said fearfully, as she took a step back. Graphia? Stop joking, Ingvild. This is the day you've been waiting for so long, she said confused, to which Ingvild could only shake her head. Ingvild quickly turned to see her reflection in that dress again, but suddenly her outfit changed to when she was wearing the uniform of the Qua Academy. She did not understand what was happening, to which she quickly saw that the corridors were completely empty, to which she walked slowly. She felt scared of what was happening, in that she observes that Issei Hayato was walking very calmly in a corridor, so she didn't think twice and started walking in his direction, only to see that the brown-haired boy stopped and was turning his back on her. With nerves she approached him, but when she was going to touch his shoulder, a voice pulled her out of her thoughts, only to see in front of her something that made her open her eyes. She was in front of her, but that was impossible. She was behind Issei. Issei. What do you want? He asked with a tone full of hatred. Issei was silent for a few minutes before starting to laugh. This left Ingvald surprised nightmare. Issei. I understand what you're saying, he said with a small smile on his face. Apparently the apple never falls far from the tree, he said seriously. This attracted the attention of the real Ingvald. Ingvald nightmare? What do you mean? She asked with a frown. Issei. In the end you are not so different from the other demons, and especially from your Leviathan family, he said coldly, to which the Ingvald of the nightmare tried to slap Issei, but Issei easily stopped her. Ingvald nightmare. I couldn't be with someone like you, she said angrily. After all, D is a better person than you, she said, while showing a mocking smile on her face. Ingvald. That's a lie, he's my hero, he gave his life to save me, she said sadly and angrily while claiming the fake Ingvald. The real Ingvald walks in the direction of the fake Ingvald. When she is close enough she slaps her. But something happened that scared her. It's past her as if she were a ghost that made her open her eyes with fear. Ingvald nightmare. You see this? All this is happening because of making the worst mistake of your life, she said mockingly, as the scene changes to be completely dark and a light that illuminates both the real and the fake Ingvald. Ingvald? No, this shouldn't be happening, she said with fear, which the fake Ingvald denies with a finger and a smile on her face. Ingvald nightmare. It's already happening, you had your chance with him, she said as if it was the most normal thing in the world. But I am the representation of your mistakes, she said with a mocking smile on her face as she sees the real Ingvald in the face. The end of Ingvald Leviathan. Ingvald suddenly got up only to find herself in her room. She brought her hands to her face where she could feel her face wet. With that nightmare she was losing something important inside her. Evil. If I had realized the truth, maybe things would have been different, she told herself sadly. I just hope I can fix my past mistakes, she said sadly. She got out of bed, which is why she got out of bed. It was still early in the morning. Sometimes the memories of how she treated the brown-haired boy she saw when she closed his eyes. Maybe if she was looking for the truth or showing what really happened to others, they would open their eyes of what had really happened. But then she imagined the brown-haired boy refusing to help such hypocritical people who had been crawling in search of his help. As she was going down the stairs, she could see Office Ouroboros in the living room eating some chocolates, which makes her miss that action. But as she was walking, Office said a few words that caught her attention. The Office. So you're opening your eyes to what's really going on, she said with her expressionless tone, leaving Ingvild confused. Ingvild, what are you talking about? She asked curiously, as she turns to look at her. The Office, who Diheda really belongs to, an imposter, a lustful imposter, among other things, just looking to draw attention to something he didn't do, she said with her expressionless tone. But Ingvild saw how Office broke her chocolate into several pieces. Ingvild? Yes, I saw the cruel truth of who actually saved me, she said sadly, to which Office cocked her head. The Office? You saw the truth, but the question is, which truth did you see? She asked with her expressionless tone. This caught Ingvild's attention. Ingvild? What a truth, she said in disbelief, but something exploded inside her. It's not obvious that I saw how Issei took it out on himself for protecting stupid people like me, she said sadly, as tears fell from her eyes. The Office. I understand, she said, while she takes a piece of chocolate, and before eating it, she looks intently at Ingvild. But what if there was another truth, the truth of who Albedo really is and why he does all this? She said, which left with disbelief. Ingvild. Wait, can you help us find out who Albedo is? She said, shocked, but Office shook her head. The Office. I'm only going to help you. The others have lost my confidence by falling into the same game over and over again, she said coldly. Ingvild, how do you plan to help me? She asked with curiosity. The Office? There is only one person who can show you the truth, and that person is Baccarat, she said, to which Ingvild opened her eyes with surprise. He told me that he is willing to open your eyes a few days ago, but keep in mind that you will not be able to tell any of this to other people, she said, to which Ingvild nodded. Ingvild, why are you helping me? She asked with sadness, to which Office looked up a little, where Ingvild could see a smile on Office's face. The Office. He has helped me to understand feelings, emotions, she said, which left Ingvild with great impact. Many of us underestimated him because of his appearance, or because of lies from others, and still he stayed to help people as cruel as us, she said, which Ingvild lowered her head with shame at those words, not knowing that her talk was being listened to by Valerie Lucifer, who was with a look full of hatred on her face. She was going to infiltrate and find out who Albedo really is, but she got confused about which is the real truth. Albion. You're planning a silly thing, but let's see how you react to the cruel truth, Albion said to his carrier, who had become even more confused about what was happening. Valerie, I don't care what that truth is. I'm only interested in getting revenge on that Albedo guy. He had hurt people important to me, she said in her mind, to which Albion inside the divine dividing only shook his head, the attitude of his carrier. Things were getting complicated at the Haida residence. Ingvild was about to find out the truth of every lie that Diheda told, but she felt that it was going to hurt her in the worst way to find out the cruel truth. Ingvild was on her way to her room after that talk with Office Ouroboros, but it was difficult for her to understand that Albedo had to do with Issei's past. It was strange to her, but a thought crossed her mind. Ingvild. Issei had already met Albedo in the past, or Pilio told him once before. That was his only thought. At that, a security camera inside the Haida mansion moved, which paid close attention to Ingvild Leviathan, who was still deep in her thoughts. Elsewhere, Besid, Haida was walking through the streets. It had taken some time for him to have a hard time after that fight with Valir Lucifer. He blamed them for everything he had suffered. Issei. I'm sick of all this, my revenge is just starting and I'm not going to stop for the world. I swear, those people who made fun of me or turned their backs on me were going to pay in the worst way possible. Without realizing it, He was passing through a pedestrian crossing, but suddenly the traffic light changed from red to green. The car light illuminated the view of the brown-haired boy, which opened his eyes suddenly, without being able to wait for him. He was hit by that car. The only thing he could see was when two people were getting out of the car to help him. After a few moments he closed his eyes because of that blow he had received. Things were changing. Issei had been hit by that car that took him by surprise. Far from Hei, there was a guy watching all this with a small smile before looking at his watch. At the right time as always, she smiled when she saw several adults get out of their cars to help Issei. I just hope Great Red will help her. Maybe in the future she will end up with him. After all, life can take unexpected turns in different ways, and a beautiful love can be born from there. But other girls are going to be interested in him, and he will realize that she will not be the only one in his heart. She said calmly, watching as the traffic light changed back to red. The ambulance arrived after a few minutes, where two girls could be observed watching the brown-haired boy with concern. The people were none other than the two teenagers. The older one was driving the car in the direction of her house, which seemed worried about how Issei ended up, but some saw how the car turned out that seemed to have a huge dent in the bumper. The two girls didn't seem worried about the car, it was more about the boy, to which they approached the paramedics who were checking on the brown-haired boy. The first girl is a girl of great beauty, with beautiful gray eyes and orange hair. Her hairstyle has been modified slightly long. Her name is Orikamina. She was calling her brother on the phone about what had happened. Next to her was her friend who seemed to have her hands in her mouth because of what had happened. The second girl had white hair with a somewhat pale skin. Her eyes were of a red color. Her name is Yuno Shojimura. Oriheim, this is bad. If I had noticed the traffic lights I wouldn't have passed, she said with concern, to which the white-haired girl turned to see her with a confused look. Una. It wasn't your fault. The traffic light must have had some fault. She pointed with her hand to said traffic light that had a short circuit. Borhem? I just hope he's okay. It wasn't my intention to run him over with the car, she said with concern, to which Iona nodded her head. In that they see how the brown-haired boy woke up all of a sudden, which frightened those present, but they saw something scared as he covers his head with his hands. Issei, damn, that really hurt, he said with his hands on his head while he covers his head from the blow he received. Paramedic. At least he is in perfect condition. It will be best to take him to the hospital to see if he is okay, said one of the paramedics while Issei sighed in annoyance. Issei. It was just a slight bump. It's not a big deal, he thought, looking that he was the center of attention of several people. Issei cursed his luck of what had happened. He had to pretend, so he had no choice but to get into the ambulance heading to the hospital while holding his head in one hand and pretending to lose his balance. Greg, partner, it looks like things are getting complicated with your clone, he informed him, to which Issei made a small grimace of disgust on his face as he climbed with help to the ambulance. Issei. What do you mean? He asked confused, to which Drake was silent for a few moments. Greg. He is currently planning to kill the Kromkrok bearer's wielder, he said in Issei's mind seriously, to which Issei could only put a disgusted look on his face. Issei. That damn clone, I wanted to kill them, but what can be done? He let out a heavy sigh as he watched the ambulance door being closed, but he saw for a few moments two girls chatting through the window. Greg. To tell you, if you're only interested in making the faction suffer, he said with a bored tone, to which Issei affirmed in his mind. Issei. Yes, but I have my reasons and I'm not going to stop even if everyone starts begging for my forgiveness, he said mentally, then closed his eyes and waited to get to the hospital. Elsewhere, the ex-leader of the Fallen Angels with a serious look on his face while watching the recordings of where the fight between Lavinia and Albedo took place, but he could not find anything. It seemed that the evidence was deleted. Azazel. Damn, things are getting too complicated, he said angrily. While checking the videos over and over, he can't notice that something is missing in said videos. This was seen by his former soldiers who seemed to be with a look of sadness to notice their leader so desperate. Not even Azazel could notice the appearance of such albedo, only that his aliens were a red color, the symbol he wears on his chest. Azazel. There is only one solution left, and there is no going back, he said in his thoughts, while a magic circle appears in his right ear. We need to deal with a serious topic, he said, to which the other voice agreed. While checking the videos for the last time, he realized that there was nothing about this Albedo guy. It seems that Albedo was going to continue hiding, and worst of all, there was no information of another appearance in the last 24 hours. In another place, you can see the Slashdog team with a look of helplessness, especially one person, and that person was none other than Tobio Ikis. If only he had been there, all this would not have happened. That Albedo seemed to attack the factions when raising Natsum. We must do something against him, we can't stand idly by, she said sadly. But Tobio just kept thinking about something that will help Albedo come out of the shadows. Shigeon. The only thing that remains for us is that the Olympians come to free the goddess Nyx, she said, remembering how Issei had asked for the freedom of said goddess, but Zeus had refused. Koki? Then we just have to lure the two of them to have a fight, and that's it, to which Tobio shook his head. Tobio? You are crazy, Kulki. Issei is not going to tempt his heart, or so Azazel told me, since he possessed with that ghost tomb knight of Rios Gremory, no matter that several people are seeing him, he said, to which Cookie opened her eyes with terror when remembering the fight of the two ghosts that many of them saw. Shigeon. Suzaku is frustrated, she says it's her fault, she said, to which Tobio could only clench his fist for remembering in the state that his second cousin was left. The talk continued about how to ask for help from Miss Heidu, but this did not seem to take much importance in the past. But now many needed him and knew that to ask for his help, they needed to give him something in return. Heidu residence. You can see Dai Heidu walking back and forth with a worried look on his face. It was becoming difficult for him to hide. He could barely follow his new enemy, and in training, it became obvious that his fighting style was becoming more disposable every day. Dai. Damn, this must not be happening, he shouted in his mind. There was no way to beat this new enemy. He must have been looking for a solution. He previously tried to approach the Galvan, but it looked at him indifferently. That damn Galvan should help me, but he only follows my brother, he said with frustration, while tears of helplessness escaped from his eyes. All this was seen by Albedo, who was just chuckling. It was funny to him to see how Heidu's house of cards was slowly falling down. Only a little push was missing. Albedo. If he's having a hard time, now that Ingvild girl, instead of getting closer to his Sei, is pushing him away with her attitude. He said coldly he didn't understand romantic relationships, and that relationship from his point of view seemed to be hypocritical. Ingvild's attitude in approaching the brown-haired boy did not go unnoticed by several people. Among one of them was, many did not give much importance to him. Besides, the Infinity Dragon Goddess also opened her eyes to realize who Heidu really is. Without much to give importance, she saw how Albedo stopped her, rather paralyzed. For Albedo this was something to which he was used, so he just turned still sight of him, and saw the cause of all this. Albedo. Long time no see, Professor Paradox. What are you doing around here? He asked with curiosity if Albedo only saw this person as someone annoying in his plans. Professor Paradox. It's good to see you, Albedo. What am I doing here? I'm just uniting several people, he said without paying much attention to the look Albedo gave him. Albedo. That's annoying, but that means it's a true love relationship. Can he ask what people it's about? He said with a little teasing tone on his face. Professor Paradox. It's a surprise, Albedo. I don't want to ruin the surprise, he said with a smile, to which Albedo just shook his head. Albedo. Always so much mystery. Where are you going, Paradox? I hope you try anything against the revenge of my student, he said coldly, to which Professor Paradox did not erase that smile. Professor Paradox. I don't know what to tell you, the future always changes, he said, to which Albedo only grimaced in disgust at those words. Albedo. You were always difficult to understand, but what can I do against you? You always move in time as if nothing, he said with boredom, to which Professor Paradox only shook his head. Albedo only watched as Professor Paradox left while time went on again in the world where he only left the scene of a Dai Heidu crying like a small child. People like Dai did not deserve his time. He had other plans in mind and had an assistant for that mission. Flashback. There was a say hi to you with a bored look on his face as he looked intently at a place where Gabriel was lying on the ground with a lifeless look in her eyes. Albedo. It seems that her desires to fight have ceased to exist, he said with a mocking smile, as he stood on the shoulder of the brown-haired boy. Issei. It seems that way. Besides showing the horror that those people who follow Loam's name have committed, they are not what they seem, he said with boredom. At that the brown-haired boy jumps back, watching as a spear of light sticks into the ground. In front of him he could see a particular girl by her white wings. Issei raised an eyebrow at the sight of that girl. Monster, you're going to pay for what you've done, she said, as she glared murderously at the brown-haired boy. Issei. Calm down. If you stay angry you will fall for the desire for revenge, he said with a mocking smile on his face. You're a monster for doing all this, maybe you don't have a heart, she said angrily, to which Issei with boredom touched the dial of the Omnitrix, and selected the alien he wanted to use against her. Issei, I present you to your perdition, the mummy, he said with mockery, while watching attentively that girl, who only let out a snort of mockery because she was watching. Just because you're a bunch of bandages now doesn't mean you can beat me, she said, while in each hand there were now 2 light spears. Albedo just shook his head at the stupidity of that angel. She shouldn't underestimate the Thepkifin species, one of the most dangerous alien species. He just shook his head while watching that girl attack his apprentice. The girl opened her eyes to observe how the mummy threw several bandages at her, to which she rose in the air in order to avoid them. But these were extended with the intention of tying her up. If you are made of bandages it will be easy to cut them, she said confidently, as she throws herself at the brown-haired boy, in order to cut it in 2 with a smile on her face. Albedo. Foolish angel, Yahweh will be disappointed, he thought. A few inches from the brown-haired boy, bandages had come out of the ground, which took the girl by surprise. She could not move and the spear she was holding had fallen to the ground with a thud. Issei. It seems that you are trapped, Angel-sama, but you will be useful to me in the Angel's faction, he said with a smile, to which she looked at him with an angry look on her face. I'm not going to cooperate with cruel people like you. Nothing in this world will force me to join you, she said with a determined look on her face, to which the mummy just shook her head. Issei, if I want to prove something, we'll see if it's true, he said calmly. They say that power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, he said while leaving his chest uncovered, letting something show that the angel felt a chill because of what was in the chest of the brown-haired boy. What is that? She asked with fear, as she felt how her body began to tremble as she got closer to that strange diamond. Issei, I present to you the Keroshium, he said happily. In humans it can cause great mutations. We will see what happens with a supernatural being like you and more with its opposite, so to speak, he said calmly. Albedo only observed how that girl was a victim of that power, which began to scream in pain. The girl's wings began to take on a dark color made of pure dark energy. The girl's eyes were turning a dark color. Time skip. Issei was in his human form watching as that girl was with a look of complete happiness on her face while staring at the brown-haired boy. Albedo. Who would have thought that corruption in an angel would have great effects? Seeing with a smile how the girl overflows a lot of power. They say, and if we need several allies and that those people are trustworthy, after all, blindly trusting people can lead us to make big mistakes, he said coldly. Anyway, I want you to find important information about heaven and the weaknesses of its system, he said coldly, while the girl slowly nodded her head. End of flashback. Albedo only smiled to see great successes in corrupting with Kerodium. Mummy was useful both on the battlefield and in getting allies, and she was not the only one. Issei managed to get 2 other people to follow him after fighting Mummy. Albedo, I just need some good materials and we will have a great army, he said seriously, as he saw that the world was slowly starting to burn. There were some robots that Vilgax believed that by synchronizing the Omnitrix with them, he was going to crush the factions, but he needed several materials to create said robots. Thanks to magic, he was able to hide them in a pocket dimension in front of the noses of the leaders who were going to suspect that they were in their own territory. Albedo, it will be best to continue as planned, he said calmly, as he walked back to Issei's room. The bad guys must also rest. Besides, they need to be made of a specific metal," he said with a smile on his face. Meanwhile, in the sixth heaven, a girl is observed carefully reviewing some files. According to the information collected by several soldiers, she was found with serious wounds nearby where he appeared ghostly. According to rumors, he has serious problems with lack of memory. I was currently checking in the office of the Gabriel Seraphim, which the aforementioned one saw all this with an empty gaze. At that, the girl approached where Gabriel is located at a slow pace. "It's harder than I thought. There must be a way to get more information," she said, while watching Gabriel intently. "Gabriel? Father?" He could barely say those words. Wait, no. "You are your Elizabeth," she said, as she saw one of her brave saints. "Elizabeth? I know, the power that I saw showed me was enough to know that we angels are weak," she said with a too sweet smile, while touching the seraph's cheek with one hand. Seraphim Gabriel could only watch all this as tears of frustration escaped from her eyes. Somehow the alarms of heaven had somehow been modified. "Elizabeth, I hope the others will be lucky with their mission. Isama will not be happy if we show not to be useful to him," she said with frustration of having failed her master. While going back to check the information, it could be seen that her eyes turned a dark purple color. "Elizabeth. He will be the one who will guide us till New World," she said coldly, as she left with the Seraphim Gabriel from that office with a single goal. "Gabriel. I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. This wouldn't have happened if I had trusted Issei-san." She thought guiltily of what was happening at the Hayada residence. It was already daylight where everyone was having breakfast, where Nglev Leviathan was apart from the others. She was finally going to be more about the truth that Issei Hayada was hiding, but she had a bad feeling. "Ravel. Ingvald-sama," said the younger sister of Rival Phoenix. "Ingvald. What's the matter?" she asked curiously, while watching Dai Hayada's manager. "Ravel? It's just that I see you extremely distracted," she said with concern. "You seems not to be well," she said with the same tone of voice. "Ingvild? It's okay, I feel perfectly fine," she said with a fake smile. "Whom I want to fool, I feel like I'm the worst," she thought with a reproachful look. "Gravel? If you say so," she said, unconvinced. "By the way, you reminded Dai-sama of today's agenda," she said calmly. Ingvild, hearing the name of Diheidu, put a disgusted grimace on her face. She regretted being his queen. She regretted having believed him, and all for what? To lose the person I loved for who she is. "Ingvild? Of course," she said with a curt tone. She didn't really tell him anything about his schedule. "Ravel? Okay, by the way, we must see that it happened with some things," she said. At that she saw how Ingvild shook her head. "Ingvald? I'm sorry, Ravel, but I have an extremely important engagement to attend to today," she said seriously, to which Ravel did not see any lie on Ingvald's face. In that they observed how the little Galvin was going with a rocket backpack on his back in the direction of the kitchen. This caught the attention of the present when they saw him crossing in front of them. "Bravo! How rude you are for crossing between us," she said with annoyed look, as she saw the Galvin floating in front of her. "Galvin! It shouldn't matter to you, after all it was just an accident, it's hard to control these things," he said with a guilty look, but actually he had done it on purpose. "Ravel, you!" She was interrupted by a hand that was placed in front of her. "Ingvild. It wasn't his fault, Ravel-chan, besides you want to annoy him if he didn't do anything to you," she said coldly, to which Ravel was surprised by the tone Ingvild used. "Ravel. I understand," she said angrily, while clenching her teeth because of the frustration she felt at that moment. "Ingvild. By the way, Galvin-san, we can talk in private," she said, while Galvin was silent for a few seconds. "Alvin." "Of course," he said, while he wanted to stay away from the blonde-haired girl next to Ingvild. Ingvild started walking to the living room while being followed by Galvin at the sight of Ravel Phoenix. This was seen from the second floor by the descendant of Lucifer Morningstar. "Allery. That bastard," she said with frustration, remembering how she told her to build him a weapon to kill Albedo, but she received a no as an answer, which upset her greatly. Many were looking for his help, but it seemed that Galvin was not going to give his hand to twist. Valerie, in a fit of rage of how they hurt Lavinia Arena, used hypnosis. She was not thinking about what she was doing, but it seemed to have no effect on her because she was mortally wounded by the hands of a certain red dragon for doing such nonsense. Returning with Albedo and Ingvild, the latter was sitting on a sofa for one person. At the small table in the living room was Albedo with a serious look on his face. "Elvin, what was that you wanted to ask me?" he asked with some curiosity, to which Ingvild briefed Ando for what he wanted to ask. "Ingvild? I want to know what I'm doing wrong," she said honestly. Albedo was getting an idea of what she wanted to know specifically. "Every time I want to get closer to him, he moves further and further away," she said with a lowered gaze, to which Galvin remained silent for a few minutes. "Alvin, your way of thinking," he said directly. This made Ingvild raise her head in disbelief. Saying that nothing happened and starting something that never existed is bothering him, since she thinks it's a joke on your part, and you're telling him to his face that he's a second-hand dish. You're just confusing him more," he said coldly, while Ingvild remembered all the times she looks for the brown-hair boy, and it resulted in failed attempts. "Ingvild? I just don't want to push him away anymore," she said sadly. The room they were in had a spell to prevent anyone from listening to them. "Alvin. Seriously?" he said sarcastically. "Instead of him getting closer to you, you push him further away. I'm sorry for what I'm going to tell you, but you have to give him time. First, you have to be his friend, and if something comes out of it, well, that's another story. You have to support each other, have confidence in each other," he said seriously, to which Ingvild was beginning to understand his words. "Ingvild, I understand, thank you for helping me," she said with a small smile. "Elvin, I'm just telling you the truth. I hope you can heal his wounds," he said with a small smile. "Because from his madness no one has his salvation anymore," he thought with that dark smile. "But Issei, hi dude." You can see Issei with a look of annoyance when he left the hospital. He had had more than one medical examination, and the worst of all, he was vaccinated against his will. "Issei, I'm sick of all this. I want to go home and rest now," he said with annoyance as he walked out of the hospital. Before he could say anything more, he saw a policeman walking in his direction and could only curse under his breath about what was about to happen. "Good afternoon, young man," said the policeman, and Issei looked at him with some distrust. "If you wanted to know if you are going to file any complaint against the person who tried to kill you," he said, to which Issei was silent for a few minutes. "Issei. I'm sorry, police, but I was informed that where the collision took place there was a short circuit at the traffic lights," he said wearily. "Policeman, I understand you, young man, but I think you are letting them go free without any punishment," he said, to which Issei just sighed, realizing what this policeman was trying to do. "Issei. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to file a complaint," he said coldly, while releasing his killer instinct. "Besides, it will be annoying to waste more of my valuable time," he thought coldly. And Grigory. Several fallen angels could be seen running for their lives before the being that was making the place shake, and it was serious. Azazel only saw that being with an angry look. Apparently, he was not alone because they could not communicate with other factions. Shemhazai was leading people to safe areas, but when they were inside of that being, he limited himself to playing trample. If they flew, he played with his hand that was a fly swatter. In that he observes two people going in the direction of that being, as is alone, only cursed loudly since it was about none other than Borakiel and Pennymew. "Pennymew? Damn alien," she said, while she seized the center where the Omnitrix of that albedo guy was. "You're going to pay," she said, while throwing a spear of light into his chest, but the being energy just blocked it with one of his fingers. "Albedo. Don't bother Crow," he said coldly, as he retracts his fist and throws a blow into the air that caused a huge blizzard of wind that sent the Quadrupanum flying. Irakiel just watched that blow. He could barely avoid flying out, but they didn't have it easy, so he created a huge magic circle with the intention of electrocuting him. The team of Tobioikus were in Grigory with the intention of defeating the being, but he seemed not to pay much attention to them, in that they see how he raises his hand. "Albedo. I have tricks too," he said coldly, while directing his hand to the Omnitrix. He wanted to make them suffer in another way, and he knew the perfect alien for this. The crimson glow surrounded him. Now he was the size of a person. He was a black being. He has a tail with a conductor, 2 antennas and some circles around his hip and arms, also some conductors in his hands. The symbol of the Omnitrix was red along with its one eye. Albedo. I present to you Feedback, but you can call him Your Majesty Feedback-sama, he said arrogantly, which many gave him is crazy how wrong they were. Borikil. Don't be arrogant, you fucking brat, he said angrily, while throwing a holy lightning bolt, to which Feedback only sees this with a smile on his face. Feedback, thanks for the old food, he said as he absorbed that holy ray. But I'm kind of full, I give it back to you. As he shoots the ray of the drivers from his hands. He returned the attack to Borikil, who was shocked, but Azazel understood why Albedo was using that alien. He just had something to say. Azazel. Damn, he said before seeing Feedback start beating Borikil up with everything he had and besides using him as a battery with legs. Be back. Thank you for helping me, Mr. Crow, he said, as he absorbed Borikil's energy for his own benefit. I'm on, he said, as he hit his 2 hands before lunging at the soldiers who were in support. Tobio. You'll pay for everything you've done, he said angrily, as he lunges at Feedback. Feedback just steps aside and lets Tobio go straight on. Feedback. Oh, he said with a mocking tone, while dodging. While the others tried to confront him, they saw how Feedback humiliated them like children and more his way of mocking. This made more than one lose his temper. Feedback. It's time to use my legendary technique, he said with mockery, as he throws himself to hit Tobio, who in an oversight under the guard. First left, before hitting him with that hand. Now right. And then hitting him with the other hand. He repeated the action. In an oversight of Feedback, his antennas were held by Jean, the sacred gear of Tobio IQs. At this he drew a little devil brand smile. Feedback. Wait, let go of me, you fucking mutt, he shouted while trying to free himself from Jean. Azazel, apparently you're not so badass anymore, he said seriously as he approaches Feedback, which annoyed Feedback. Feedback. What can I tell you? Everyone has a weakness, he said angrily, while being surrounded by the Slash-Dog team, Peninu and Azazel himself. Azazel. Last words, he said coldly, to which Feedback stayed for a while thinking. Feedback. Just one, this is art, he said before a blue glow covered him. Everyone who saw that blue glow was scared, in that they see how a shadow came out of that blue ray. With his arms crossed, he stood in front of everyone and said a few words. Be back. They missed me, he screamed with excitement, seeing how people started running out of terror. You've bored me already, the best thing will be to get out of here, he said before flying away. After a while, several people could be seen leaving the shelters in fear to get closer to where the cadres were, but they saw with terror how some had burns on their skin. But the worst seemed to have been Penemu, who seemed to have several fatal wounds on her body. People were getting closer, including some doctors to help the injured. When a doctor approached a specific person to see if he still had a pulse, he got the worst news when he realized that he had no pulse. Everyone couldn't believe the person who had died from that explosion. It was a Slash-Dog team member, none other than Koki Samajima. His heart stopped in his tracks. The day marked a great day for the Fallen Angels faction, and the Slash-Dog team lost an important member in their team. They were humiliated again, but this time they took innocent lives with them. Shem has I. Start helping people, don't stand idly by, he said helplessly that he couldn't have helped them against Albedo. The soldiers quickly began to help people. The buildings were in terrible condition. The attack at this time was planned in order to cause great losses. Barakil's condition was his power drained to the maximum, so they had no choice but to induce the Thunder Master into a coma. Azazel, the former leader of Gregory, was left with serious injuries and burns. Valpanama suffered from the same injuries as Azazel, but she unfortunately lost 2 pairs of her wings. Shimizi, we have only one way out, he said angrily. Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.